Language has always been a fundamental characteristic of mankind. The first language dates back to 1400s before Christ approximately, but scholars point out how communication between primitive men began 1600 years ago. The use of language derives from the need to share information, and information, once handed down, represents the heritage of humanity, centuries of evolution and learning during which men, through language, have delivered the knowledge accumulated over the years to subsequent generations. Today, there are 6,000 languages, and each of them has undergone a long process of evolution that has altered structure, vocabulary, and pronunciation. The most spoken language is Mandarin Chinese, with 1.2 billion active speakers, followed by English, with 400 million speakers. There are many factors that determine the emergence of a language over another, from demographic growth to the economic, political, military, and technological development of the country that uses it. The history of English is an international story which dates back to 400 AD, and its ending has not been written. In ancient times, European languages were all similar. There were 8 groups belonging to the Indo-European family, and English is considered as a Germanic language. Unfortunately, evidence about the ancient form of English has been lost, and the first information we received dates back to the period of the Celts, who lived in Great Britain until 50 AD. The discovery of Sanskrit, the ancient language of India, was the key to understanding the similarities between the Indo-European languages, and is the only way to get an idea of the English language at the time. The Romans, who succeeded the Celts, built cities on their model and led to the Christianization of the island. And it was thanks to the monasteries erected in this period that England became one of the centers of intellectual life during the 7th century. Old English was identified with the first invasions by the Anglos, the Utes, and the Saxons in the first half of the 400s. Old English consists of all dialects spoken by these Germanic tribes, which were more similar to the modern German than to the modern English. 85% of the words used at the time are no longer in use today. One of the most influential events during the history of English was the conquest by the Normans at the beginning of the 11th century. For about 2 centuries, England was under French rule, and English became the language of the lower class. Some historians of the time expressed their concerns about the future of English, given the change of nationality in the nobility and within the monasteries, but history will prove they were wrong. At the beginning of 1200s, King John reigned over Normandy and England, and his love for Isabella of Angoulême was the cause of the war between France and England. Isabel had been betrothed to a member of a powerful family, Hugh IX Le Brun, and King John, anticipating Hugh's reaction, decided to attack him. This prompted Hugh Le Brun to seek support of the King of France, who called King John to process him. When, on the second day of the trial, the King of England did not show up, King Philip ordered the expropriation of King John's land in France. Although all ties between Normandy and England had been severed, there were new waves of migration due to the nationality of the new queen. Also, when King John died, Isabel married the one she had been betrothed to, which led further migration waves from France. In this period, England was divided among foreigners, to the point that a strong nationalist sentiment emerged among the English barons, which resulted in the Baron War and led to the expulsion of many foreigners. French remained the main language not only in England, but throughout Europe, and there were 2 key events that led to the restoration of English in the national territory: the Hundred Years' War and the Black Death. It would be hard to summarize the reason that led to the conflict, but because of it, the British began to perceive French as the language of the enemy. Later, with the Black Death, which spread in 1348, 30% of the European population died, many of whom belonged to the lower class, and those who survived became the only laborers available. By the end of the 15th century, English will become the main language in England. In 1362, the Statute of Pleading was ratified, which re-established English as a language in the course. This is how the French rule ends, but its influence over the centuries has profoundly altered the language. The changes involve phonetics, grammar, and vocabulary. Fortunately, the complex declension system of Old English is simplified as well as division into genres. First on Germanic model, while now based on the natural sex of the individual. More than 1,000 words were added from French and Latin, especially words related to government administration, army, art, and medicine. A key feature of Middle English, whose reference period goes from 1150 to 1500s, is the numerous spoken dialects in England. The British from northern England, in fact, were unable to communicate with the southern compatriots. By the end of the 15th century, London English became the standard language. The process was quickened as much as simplified by the invention of the printing press and by the intention of the most educated people to create a standard language. So, in the 15th, the period best known as the Renaissance, the discovery of America and the resulting European expansion brought wealth and development in the whole continent. During the Middle English periods, even Chaucer, the great poet, could not earn his living with poetry. But during the Renaissance, greater importance was given to the arts. The main problem of English was to replace Latin in the literary and scientific fields. There was a battle between those who supported the use of dialects and those who supported classical languages. The latter believed that vulgar dialects were not able to express the abstract concepts left to us by the great men of the past. The press allowed a rapid spread of ancient texts translated into English, and this, together with the support of great intellectuals like Eliot and Mulcaster, promoted the use of English instead of Latin. During the Renaissance, one of the major changes in the English language occurred, the big vocal shift. A became E, and O became I and U, while high vowels, I and U, were turned into the diphthongs I and O. Shakespeare, considered as the greatest playwright of all times, is the major exponent of the Renaissance. The themes addressed by Shakespeare were love, struggle for power, death, illusion, and the fugacity and precariousness of life. Shakespeare also investigates the feeling of and moods of humans in their variety and complexity, including moral and psychological problems, as anxiety and madness. He also recovers the fantastic and irrational dimension of the Middle Ages, that of the ghosts in Hamlet or fairies and elves in A Midsummer Night's Dream. The themes addressed by Shakespeare make him the son of the Renaissance, given his strong anthropocentrism, and the precursor of Baroque, given his uncertainty in ideals and the conviction of the mutability of the faith. From the Renaissance onwards, English will continue to have a great influence on the Western world. From the expansion of the empire to the 21st century technologies, there are many reasons for its diffusion, which are synthesized, in my opinion, by the British linguist David Crystal. English was in the right place at the right time. Nowadays, globalization is evident. Will English be the language of the world? Given the complexity of the possibilities, only time can give us an answer.